Hello, it's me, and it's time for an interesting viewer question. You can see that this is the 4x4 rhombic dodecahedron, and this is kind of the configuration that he had. Now, his color scheme was a little different than mine. He had the white puzzle, and I think he had the red and the yellow, or rather the red and the orange that were like this. Mine is the blue and the yellow, so I hope that doesn't trip you up too much. But basically, his question was this. The way that he does it is a very intuitive technique. It's a layer by layer approach where he puts in the top layer at the same time that he puts in the middle layer. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that approach is, but it inevitably leads to this situation in this particular puzzle. Now, the reason why this happens is because basically this is parity. So this will work for a 3x3, but it's not going to potentially work for a 4x4 supercube because of the parity that you have. Now, the way that I do the puzzle is I would end up with a similar situation, but I would have 2 out and 2 in, so to speak. This is really the same thing. You have 2 out and the rest are basically in. This is a parity situation because you need to do an odd number swap in order to solve this, which you can't do if you follow the rules of an even layer puzzle. It breaks the rules of the cube, so to speak. So to get out of this, you have to use an algorithm that I use in order to swap 2 sides without messing anything else up. So those that have seen my tutorials on this or 4x4 supercubes will recognize this as an algorithm that I've used before to get out of that trap. Now, because these are not of the same layer, that's okay. I can deconstruct and reconstruct. But the way to get out of this is your top layer here. This is your middle layer over here. What you want to do is bring this down so that it's just opposite what you want to flip-flop. And then you go ahead and do the algorithm that switches this without causing parity anywhere else. So again, in your case, I think you have red and orange. This may be red here, this may be orange. But move it down so that it's like this. And now do this variation, this monstrous URF'd algorithm. Now what this is every so often we're going to be doing U's from the middle U and D's from the middle D. But what this is this is going to be starting off with a middle UI. So it's going to be UI, and then R, and then FI, and now just the top, U, RI, F. Then you do a middle U, and then you do a middle D, and then finish it up with FI, R, UI, then F, RI, and finish it up with a DI. So you're just moving a middle DI. What that will do is that will cleanly swap these 2 pieces, and then all you have to do is move it up, and you've got it solved. So the reason why your particular strategy got you this far but no further is because you ended up with parity, which is what you're going to expect with a supercube. But this algorithm, when appropriately positioned, will get you out of that. So nothing new that I've uncovered with this, just applying it to a somewhat different situation. Hope that helped. Thanks for watching. Hello, it's me again, and I'm going to add to the viewer question. I pulled this monster off the shelf because someone had a question regarding how to arrange these edges over here. Now, I've actually had a couple of different questions regarding this, so I figured I'd take this opportunity to clarify a couple things with this. Now, understand, the tutorials that I did with this, I did assume complete understanding of how to do a square one. So if the super square one seemed confusing, you got to go back and watch the square one video because that really provided a lot of the backdrop to that. So look at the square one video so that you can look at all the parity algorithms and whatnot and all the other algorithms that are used. But for the sake of completeness, I did want to address something of a more specific viewer question. What you see is a configuration that matches the configuration that the particular viewer had. Now my color scheme is different. The viewer's color scheme, instead of being white on the top, was blue on the top, and on the bottom, instead of being yellow, it was green. So some of the other schemes have changed. But if I were to hold it like this pretty much matches exactly what it or at least a close proximity of what the viewer's question was. But anyway, if this is orange over here, mine is green, the viewer's was white, so you'll have to change that accordingly. But you'll see that this is the same. What we see is that the red one is over here, the orange one is over here, and on the other side here, on the top, this is red, and instead of blue, his was actually yellow. But this one was in, and this one was the equivalent to the white, which is green. Now I'm pointing this out only for the benefit of the viewer so that they can kind of arrange that in their head. So what's my general approach to this? Well, I'm not going to go through a whole tutorial. I just wanted to go through how to get through this situation, but it portends the understanding of how to deal with these edge swapping over here. There's also a question that I had about how to deal with the corners. Well, that's actually pretty easy, because when you look at this, I'm going to use this as an example. This is actually two pairs of this. These two are like these two, and these two are like these two. And you actually tease them out and do them individually. Now you know that if I just make it turn like this, it's going to shapeshift it the way that it would happen over this as well, like this also. In order to keep it from shapeshifting, you have to prime it, which means you have to take the top and just turn it so that it's just a little off kilter here by about 30 degrees. That way you can turn it and you'll maintain your square shape. Now why is that important? Well, when I tease out the difference between these two, once I get, say, the top in, if I wanted to work on the middle, what I would do is I would prime the top like this, and that way I can do whatever I wanted with the middle, and these two will always be in a square form. And as I'm doing the algorithms, this is the equivalent of going back and forth, but I never lose that. Now let's say I finished the middle and I just wanted to work on the top, or I didn't do anything with the middle, but I wanted to work on the top and the bottom, but I didn't want to take this out of its square shape. What you would do then is you would do the same thing with these two, but just prime it from here. Once you prime it from here, we're going to go back and forth. Now this is a little hard to move sometimes, but as I go back and forth, these two will maintain its square shape, and these two will be moving back and forth as best it can. So that's basically what you want to do. In terms of getting corners, well, let me do a limited scramble, because this is like a 3x3x2, and I use pretty much the same algorithms as I would with a 3x3x2. The main difference is that these edges are not edges at all like these. So you know that there's opposite edge swaps and adjacent edge swaps. Well, we don't do any of that over here. The only time that comes into play is if we have to get these centers back. So here's what I mean by that. We'll do a limited scramble with this guy here. Abracadabra. Okay, so quite simply, once you have it in this form, and I'm not going to start off with a shape-shifted form again. My intention is not to go through a whole tutorial with this for this purpose, but just to lead up to some of the questions. The first thing that you want to do is you want to get all the corners, and the corners you're going to get just like you wanted to get with a 3x3x2. Okay, so the algorithm that I'll use is the one that swaps the corner here from the top to the bottom. So I want the orange and green one. Actually, you can even just look at the color over here. But if I didn't know the color, like if it was sandwiched in the middle, then I would just look to see what I would need if I didn't know the top or the bottom color. So over here, here's a orange and blue, so I know that this is going to go over here. And it's going to be opposite. So here's the orange, here's a blue, this is going to flip over here, and that corner swapping algorithm is 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. And that will effectively bring this down here. And I just keep following suit with that. So with this guy over here, this will come down here, 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. So this is where it needs to be, and that's how you get all of these in. Now, the same thing applies when I'm getting corners from this over here. So let's pick corners that are supposed to be where they're supposed to be. So here's red, and this is blue and yellow. So let's find, here's a yellow over here. These two match up. This is a green. It's not the same over here. So we're going to say that these are in over here. What goes down here, I can actually just look at the red over here, and this is supposed to be the other green, which is over here. See, this is red and green. I'm really not doing anything different from cuboid strategy. Now, generally what I do when I solve these is I have this coming down and to the left, only because that mimics the square 1, which is what I originally learned with. Now, to do this algorithm, if I wanted to bring this down so that this green is down here and this white is down here, in other words, we do the switch from here to here, it's going to be the same thing, but I don't want to bring myself out of the cube form. So I've got to prime it. So I simply prime the top over here, and then I do exactly the same algorithm to bring this down from up here to here, a corner swap. 2R, U, 2R, UI, and 2R. So that will effectively bring what I want to here. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So this red, blue, and white, well, this white is going to come down to here, and this blue is going to match up with this. It's exactly the same thing. It's cuboid strategy. Bring this over here, bring this across. I have to prime it to use the same thing, and that's 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, and you'll see that the bottom layer is solved. Now, I'm not worried about these edges yet. That's where things lead, but I'm just answering the questions regarding how to deal with these corners. And it's as simple as that. Now, what about the corners up here? I have them all on the right level, but how do I know that they're correct? Well, the way that you do that is you first find ones that all the corners are in. So I used to call it the sandwich formation, you can call it headlights, but these two corners are in. What you do is you move it to the left side, so it's at the left, and then you do the corner swap algorithm on the same side here. And what that is that's 2R, basically what this is going to do is this will come here and this will come here. So it'll put all the corners, if this is here, exactly where they need to be. So once again, move this to the left. If you don't have any that's in, then just do this algorithm and one of them is going to be in. Then you can pick it up from there. So 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. Then you turn the two layers that you're dealing with counterclockwise over here. Then 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. To those that have been following my strategies with this is not anything new. So you see all the corners are in at this point. And that's basically what you do with this. So let's find two corners that are in. You see two greens are here. This white needs to be swapped over here. So it's the same algorithm. The only difference is that you have to prime it. So we prime it over here, and it's exactly the same thing. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. Okay, now instead of turning the whole thing, because I won't be able to turn it because of this, I can't just move it around like that. I've actually got to turn this counterclockwise, like so, I guess to a UI, and then I got to turn the bottom counterclockwise as well. Now it's a little difficult to maneuver sometimes, but make sure you have this where it needs to be. Then you go 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R, and you will find that the corners are where they need to be. So that's how you put them in. Now sometimes you're going to find that these are not where they need to be. In other words, they're not all red. Obviously, they're not where they need to be right now. So what do I do about that? Well, what I do in this case is I treat these like they were edges. Here, not these. So this center becomes like an edge. And there's an opposite swap, there's an opposite edge swap, and that's all that you need to know. So this will swap this edge with this edge. 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U. So you see that's been swapped, that's fine. I can do the same thing here, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U. Okay, this is done exactly the same way. But what this is going to do instead is it's going to flip-flop these two. So we're going to prime it, and watch what happens when I do that. Now when I do this, that same algorithm, these don't get touched at all. So if you find yourself at the very end, but these need to be flip-flopped, you can do that. These won't get affected, nor will these. That's the magic of this algorithm. So same thing, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U. Okay, so you see it flip-flopped one half of these down. Now I just have to do the other one. So I'm just going to turn it to the side here. Sometimes you'll have one out, sometimes you'll have two out. Turn it to the side, and same thing. This will bring these down here. The reason for this is actually a, quote, parity creating algorithm. But in this case, we kind of want it to create that parity because it fixes this. 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, two R, 2U. So you'll find that that's fine over here. So that answers some questions that I've got regarding these puzzles. Now this is done the same way. Oh, now what about these edges? Well, I've told you that these edges do not behave like these edges, which means I cannot use those algorithms, cuboid algorithms, to help with those. I could use them for corners and I can use them for these guys, but not these guys. So there's really just two variations of algorithms that you need to know in order to put these in, because we're going to be using that for these guys over here. As I'm looking at this, the ease of this is that I see what colors are supposed to go where. So what you want to do is you want to first make sure that everything is moved in the right position. I don't want to dwell on that because these, the viewer actually got these in the right level, sort of. They got these on the right level, but not these, as we'll see. So it is important to go through how to do that. What you want to do to get things in the right level first off is to do an algorithm that will swap these two and these two. So these two will swap and these two will swap, and we just want to put that into a configuration where that can happen. So what we could do is actually go through another algorithm first that takes this, it swaps this with this and this with this. So these two here swap. This swaps with this, and this swaps with this, and this swaps with this, and this swaps with this. Now why is that good? Well, that's good because I'm going to take a red up here and put it down here, an orange up here and put it over here, and this will come here and this will come here. So what that is, and this is the most basic of algorithms, is the first thing that you want to do is prime the bottom. So prime, basically what that means is moving it over so that will retain the cuboid form. And then go 2R, unprime the bottom, prime the top, 2R, unprime the top. What that did is it did shuffle these around. So now these are where they need to be. That was just to kind of demonstrate that, but we still have to deal with these guys here. The algorithm that you're mostly going to be using is the one that's going to flip-flop these two and flip-flop these two. So we're going to want to put it into a position where it can do that, and here's what that algorithm is going to be. If I use this, what's going to happen is this will come down to here, which is good. This will come up to here, which is not good. And these two will flip-flop, which is not good. So really what I need is I need this one to be out, this one to be out, and I need these two to be out. So I need right angles here to be out, and I also need right angles here to be out. So it's a question of setup, and I'm going to have to set it up to where I end up with that. Right angles here and right angles here. Now it just so happens this will be the configuration that will help me with this, because this red will come up to here, so we'll have red here. This red will come up to here, so we'll have red at right angles like that. This will be an orange over here, so this will be over here. This orange will come down here, so we'll have right angles over there as well. So here's what this algorithm does to do that flipping. It starts off very similarly, but basically you want to go prime the bottom again. So prime the bottom. Now when you do that, be careful because this is going to be flip-flopping around, kind of annoying. But so prime the D, prime D, 2R, and then go DI, 2R, unprime the D. Then prime up by moving it across like this. Then go 2R, 2U, 2R, and unprime the top. Once again, prime the D, 2R, and then a full D, 2R, unprime the bottom, and then finish it off with priming the top, 2R, 2U, 2R, and unprime that. So that did what I wanted it to do. Now the next fell swoop is going to be to transition these so that all the oranges are up here and all the reds are up here. So if I move this to here, that's what's going to happen. Red down to here, orange up to here, orange up to here, red up to here. So you want this kind of right-angled configuration like that. So we'll do that algorithm once more. So prime the bottom, 2R, DI, 2R, unprime the bottom, prime up, 2R, 2U, 2R, unprime the top, prime the bottom, 2R, D, 2R, unprime the bottom, prime the top, 2R, 2U, 2R, and lo and behold it did it. So we're well on the way. So at this point we have all of our corners. Our centers are fine, and if they're not, we know how to get them back without affecting anything here. And now we just have to deal with these edges. So the first part was moving the edges from the wrong layer to the correct layer. And now the next algorithm is going to be to flip-flop these guys around. So this algorithm is actually very, very similar to the one you just did. Just a very minor variation with that. But basically what this is going to do is it's just going to swap these two on this side, and it's going to swap these two on the bottom. So on the top, the right and the back get swapped, and on the bottom, the left and the back get swapped, these two. So then it's really just a matter of seeing what needs to swap. Now understand, there could be a parity with this. I'm not going to go over that right now because that's not what this particular situation called for, and don't want to quite get into that yet. Well, who knows? Maybe there will be parity. We'll see. But so let's see what needs to happen. Well, this blue needs to come over to here. So I'm going to want to swap this to here. This will swap over to here, but that's fine for now. So I'm just going to move this back over here, and that will swap these two. How about over here? Well, this green will come here, this yellow will come here. So that's a good start. It'll swap those two, at least get it a little bit closer. So what that algorithm is once again start by priming the bottom and start off exactly the same way. 2R, DI, 2R, unprime the bottom. Start off continuing the same way, prime the top, but only this time it's 2R and then D, 2R, and unprime the top. And then you're pretty much doing that swappy thing that we said over here. This goes down here, this goes over here, these two swap and these two swap. So prime the bottom, so prime the D, 2R, unprime the D, prime the top, 2U, and unprime this. And you'll find that these two swapped nicely, and these two swapped nicely. So then it's just a matter of following suit. So I'm going to swap these two here so I can get the green one in. Actually, I'm going to probably want to put things in that are right next to each other. So I'm going to do it like this instead, because that way the white can be in, so it'll be right next to the blue. And then on the bottom, why don't we do this? No, why don't we go like this? Because that way, it's probably better if I do this, because that way the white will be here, which will match the green. So once again, we'll do that algorithm again to bring the white over here, and on the bottom to bring the white over here. So we're basically putting both whites in. Prime the bottom, and that's 2R, DI, 2R, unprime, prime the top, 2R, D, 2R, unprime the top, prime the bottom, 2R, unprime the bottom, prime the top, 2R, unprime over here. So these two are in and these two are in. All I've got to do now is swap these two and swap these two. So there's no parity here because this is an even number swap, and if there's an even number swap, we're doing good. And this should fix the whole thing. Put it over here, prime the bottom, 2R, DI, 2R, unprime, prime the top, $2R, D, 2R, unprime the top, prime the bottom, 2R, unprime, prime, 2R. Okay. So, as you can see, that's how you do it. It's really as simple as that. That is how you're going to do this. The only difference is what I just did with these two, I'm going to do with these two, and then I'm going to do with these two. I'm going to do with these two first because it's easy to see. I can see the colors over here. It's a little more shadowy over here. So this is the exact configuration. So this is how we're going to get out of it. Let's take a look at what needs to be swapped here. Well, this, I can swap these two, which won't really serve my purpose too well. I'd rather swap two that are, and make two that are next to each other. So I want this to come here and this to come here. So this is going to have to be moved over to here so that these two can swap. What about the bottom? Well, this is already in. Remember, match it to your specific color configuration, but this is already in. And I want to swap these two so that I can put the orange over here next to this. So this gets moved over to here. So here's how I variate that. It's the same algorithm, same swapping here and same swapping here, but now I've got to make sure that I prime the bottom like so. Now that I've got these two primed, I can do all the action from here to here. It will not change this at all. And by the way, it was the same thing with the corners, as long as I'm priming the top or the bottom, but this stays in this position. So I'm going to do the algorithm that swaps these two, and this is the simple version of this. This is the simple algorithm. So that's going to be 2R. Okay, so notice what I forgot to do is I forgot to prime these. Prime the top and the bottom. These two are already primed in relation to each other. These two are in relation to each other. This stays here. Now I'm going to perform the algorithms over here. So now I'm going to prime the bottom. In this case, this is the D in relation to the top here. So prime the bottom here. So prime the D. 2R, DI, 2R, unprime the bottom. Now prime the top. Make sure we're lined up correctly. 2R, D, 2R, unprime the top. Notice we're not touching these here. And now we finish with priming the D, 2R, unprime the D, prime the top, 2R, and unprime the top. Now notice, none of these changed. I didn't do anything to my corners. This is the equivalent of going back and forth. But what I did do is I did the swapping over here to get this in, and the swapping over here. So now all I have to do is move this in position so that these two can swap, and now you want to put it in position where these two can swap. So there's no parity issues with this specific confirmation. So once again, this is facing down and to the left. Prime the two slices that you're not doing anything with. This is already set up where I want it to be on this side, right and back, and now I've got to position the back over here. Much of the issues that you're gonna have with this is keeping these lined up. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but there it is. It takes a lot of concentration, this puzzle. So now we do exactly the same thing. We start off with these kind of lined up with each other correctly, where if I turned it, it would shapeshift. So I've got to prime these. This stays in a prime position. So prime the bottom, prime down rather. Make sure they're lined up. Don't get distracted. 2R, DI. See, this turned over here, so I got to turn it back. 2R, unprime the bottom, prime the top. 2R, D, make sure this is lined up. 2R, unprime the top, and then go prime the bottom, make sure it's lined up. 2R, unprime the bottom, prime the top. 2R, and unprime the top. So here's what we did. We basically solved these two, if we want to put it back in position here, the top and the bottom layers the same way as we did this. That's how to get out of that. Now, the challenge. We have to do the same thing here, but I don't have the benefit of the top and bottom colors to tell me if these edges are where they need to be. You need to figure that out. You need to figure out if these are all on the proper levels. Well, there's an easy way to do that. Make sure there's no repeating colors. if you see two reds or something, or two blues, you know one belongs up here. I see one green, one red, one orange, two reds. I've got two reds, which means one of these belong down here. Same thing here. I see a blue here. I see a blue here. I see two blues. So I've got an orange down here and an orange up here, a green down here, and a green up here. So the oranges and greens are fine. But I've got two reds in one level, which I can't have, and two greens. That's like saying I've got a green and orange over here, but I also have the green and red. Whoops. How's that? I also have the green and red up here too. It would be easy to see because you could see the colors are different. Here, we have to bear that in mind. So what I'm actually going to need to do is I'm going to need to use, in this particular situation, the algorithms to swap these, to cause these to come down. Here's what I would do. First off, we need to make sure the top and the bottom are primed so that they never come out of sync. So now I'm going to be doing all this action with these middle two layers, and as I go back and forth and back and forth, I will not do anything to my top and bottom because it's like it's going bang, bang. That's all it's going to do with those. So this stays fixed in that position. So what algorithm am I going to want to use? Well, here's what I would do in your particular case. What I would do is line up to where I need to pull a red down here and a blue up here. But I also need to make it to where these two don't cause any trouble. So if I move this here, these two oranges can swap for each other. So I'm not messing up an orange for an orange. I'm actually exchanging an orange for an orange, so that's no problem. If I do it, but if I do the algorithm, this red will exchange with this blue, and that's exactly what I want to do. This red will come down here, so I'll have two reds. I'll have one red up here, one red down here. This blue will come up here, so I'll have one blue up here and one blue down here. Do it like that, keep this primed, and let's go ahead and do the algorithm. Now this is now going to be D, and this is now going to be U. DI, so be very careful that you're just moving this, and you're keeping these exactly the same. Don't let that mess you up. Remember, these two are what this is now. These are empty sets now. Alright, so once again, DI, or D prime, prime D rather, D prime, 2R, and now just this is going to be a DI, and then 2R, and unprime the D. Now prime the U, just the U, then we have 2R, 2U, 2R, unprime the U. Prime the D, 2R, D, 2R, unprime the D, and once more, prime the U, 2R, 2U, 2R, and unprime this. So you see what I mean about concentration. Now notice a couple things. Did not touch this top part, did not touch this bottom part. Everything is fine. But now we have an orange on top, orange on bottom, blue on top, and blue on bottom, green on top, green on bottom, red on top, red on bottom. So that's the first part of how to walk out of what's going on. Now the next part is doing that same algorithm that flips these guys. So let's just coordinate things accordingly. Alright, so I'm going to move this here. I'd like to move something so that I put a solid one in next to this one. If I flip-flop these, that's not going to serve the purpose here. If I do it like this, this red will come to here, which is what I want. This orange will come here, which means this red and this blue will be together. In your case, of course, it'll be red and, what is it, yellow? Nah, I don't know anymore. Anyway, so we're going to flip-flop these two. On the bottom, these guys are going to flip-flop. We don't want to do that here, so I'm going to move this over here. Why? Because these two are going to flip-flop, so this orange is going to come into here, right next to, in my case, blue, in your case, yellow. Okay, we're going to hold it like this. Make sure I didn't mess myself up here. Okay, so hold it like this now. Make sure that the top is primed in relation to the bottom as always. And now we're just going to do the algorithm with just these two to flip-flop these two here and these two here. Okay, so we're going to do our D, priming our D, and not moving it in conjunction with these two. These two stay exactly the same. Then we have, sometimes it takes a little bit of lining up here, more than a little bit sometimes. There we go. 2R, DI, 2R, take the prime out, prime the top, 2R, D, 2R, take the up prime out, and then prime the bottom, 2R, prime out, prime the top, 2R, take the prime out. Okay, so let's see what we did. These two are good, so these two are good over here, and these two are good over here. So now we just line things up accordingly. This got messed up, but doesn't really matter. So now what I'm going to do is these two from the top need to be flipped, and these two from the bottom need to be flipped. So one final thing that I'm going to do is move this to the side here so that these two can be flipped, and then move this to the side over here so to the left and the back these can be flipped, and that should do it. Unless I miscalculated, I don't think so. Okay, so once again, make sure that the top is primed in accordance with the bottom, because these two are taken out of the picture. And now what I'm doing is I'm just doing these two just the way I did this guy over here. So prime the bottom, make sure we're lined up, 2R, DI, 2R, take the prime out, prime the top, 2R, D, 2R, take the prime out from the top, prime the bottom, take the prime out, prime the top, 2D, take the prime out, and it is solved. Okay, so that's the simplest rendition of how to do that. First off, that's how to get out of that specific situation. And believe me, it was no picnic trying to get it into that specific configuration, but that's how you walk out of that. But more importantly, that's how you conduct yourself very simply with these edges. Make sure they're at the proper level using the algorithms discussed, and then make sure that you can swap them around to isolate these two levels and these two levels. Hopefully that clarified things. This is a toughie, I know. Thanks for watching.